Hello everyone and welcome to another mystery object answer video on our own devices. I'm Jin Messier, and yesterday I showed you this object, which I found in an outdoor shooting range and initially assumed was some kind of shot shell or flare cartridge. Hopefully most of you guessed this is actually a Federal Firestick introduced in 2020 by Federal Premium Ammunition of Anoka, Minnesota for use in the Traditions Nitrofire inline muzzleloader rifle. Now, if you aren't familiar with inline muzzleloaders, traditional muzzleloaders typically look like this Navy Arms 58 caliber Morse rifle. And to load one of these, you pour a pre-measured charge of black powder down the bore, then insert your projectile, traditionally a spherical lead ball wrapped in a cloth patch, though other types are available. Then pull out this ramrod from under the barrel and use it to push the projectile back against the powder charge. Then, looking to the lock at the rear, you pull back the hammer to half cock and place a percussion cap over this nipple. Finally, you pull the hammer to full cock and then pull the trigger. The hammer falls onto the percussion cap, crushing it and igniting the explosive mixture within, traditionally based on mercury fulminate. The resulting flash travels on the hollow nipple into the chamber, setting off the powder charge and firing the weapon. Now, inline muzzleloaders work exactly the same way, only the percussion cap nipple is moved from the side of the chamber to the rear, the cap being struck by a linear firing pin rather than a side-mounted hammer, as in a regular centerfire bolt-action rifle. The inline muzzleloader was invented in 1985 by Tony Knight, founder of Knight Rifles, and there are several advantages to this configuration. For example, placing the percussion cap at the rear of the chamber rather than the side significantly reduces the lock time, that is, the delay between pulling the trigger and the powder charge going off. Also, black powder tends to leave a lot of residue that can quickly foul up the percussion cap nipple, leading to hang fires and misfires, which I can tell you from personal experience are super stressful to deal with. This residue is also highly hygroscopic, that is, it readily absorbs moisture from the atmosphere, meaning that if you don't clean your muzzleloader immediately after using it, it will tend to rust out. Inline muzzleloaders, by contrast, typically have a removable breech plug, which allows the whole barrel and chamber to be easily swapped out, as in a regular cartridge-firing bolt-action rifle. Finally, the removal of the bulky side lock allows modern optics to be more easily mounted. Now, the Federal Firestick and the Traditions Nitrofire rifle take this whole concept one step further. This rifle breaks open like a shotgun, revealing a chamber into which you can insert a firestick. These are sealed plastic blank cartridges which come preloaded with either 100 or 120 grains of Hodgson 888 black powder substitute, though you have to insert your own 209 shotgun primer prior to loading. The cartridge dimensions are roughly similar to a 28-gauge shot shell, but deliberately made slightly smaller so you can't accidentally load a live shot shell into the rifle. Now, while you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's just a regular break-action rifle, the cartridge chamber is only long enough to accommodate the firestick itself and is separated from the actual chamber by a short shelf, meaning you still have to ram your projectile separately down the barrel as in a traditional muzzleloader. Now, the main advantages of this system are speed of reloading, reliability, consistency, and safety. For example, if you're hunting with a traditional muzzleloader, you need to keep the firearm loaded at all times. Whereas with the Nitrofire, you can load your projectile and leave the fire stick out until you absolutely need it, rendering it far safer. Also, this system eliminates the headache of removing the projectile from the barrel in the case of a misfire, such as might happen if your powder gets wet. Traditionally, you would have to attach a corkscrew-type device called a worm to your ramrod and use it to screw into and extract the projectile. But with the Nitrofire, you can just pull the fire stick out of the chamber and the firearm is immediately rendered safe. The powder charge being pre-measured and sealed makes for more consistent ballistics and accuracy and makes the charge less susceptible to moisture. And before you ask, no, I am unfortunately not being sponsored by Federal to promote the Nitrofire or the Firestick.
I just think they're neat.
Now at this point you're probably wondering, well, what's the point of all this? Isn't this just one tiny step away from being a regular break-action cartridge-firing rifle? Isn't the whole point of muzzleloading the ritual of reloading and the challenge of only ever having one shot? Well, yes, but the whole reason for these sorts of systems existing is hunting regulation. See, most jurisdictions have separate seasons for conventional centerfire rifles and so-called primitive weapons like bows, crossbows, or muzzleloaders. Now, regulations vary from place to place, but typically bow hunting season is in the fall when conditions are milder, while muzzleloading season is after the main high-traffic centerfire hunting season. Whatever the case, the goal is to balance out the difficulty of hunting in order to preserve game populations. Also, in more densely populated areas, only muzzleloaders, shotguns, and bows and arrows are allowed year-round since they are shorter range and missed shots pose less of a threat to local residents and other hunters. Now, most regulations only define a muzzleloader as a firearm where the projectile is loaded through the muzzle, saying nothing of the powder charge. So something like the Nitrofire skirts up to the line of what counts as a muzzleloader without fully going over. To my mind, this smacks of loophole abuse, and apparently many regulators feel the same way because many jurisdictions only allow traditional muzzleloaders with side locks, loose powder, and open sights. But however you feel about the matter, this is still a very interesting device and a fascinating evolution of muzzleloader technology, something that I wasn't even aware of until I stumbled upon this particular fire stick at the range. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully, most of you guessed correctly. I will see you next time in another video where we'll look at yet more firearms technology and other fascinating devices just like this. Until then, I'm Jin Nessie from Our Own Devices. Have a great day. Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting wool poles.